might be experiencing in the run-up to this very dramatic eclipse. So eclipse season comes along twice a year when the sun and the moon meet up near the nodes. On a personal level, eclipses tend to bring course corrections on our life path. They can feel psychologically and emotionally disruptive, and they bring events that alter the course of our life, sometimes in very small ways, sometimes in bigger ways. That's on a personal level. For thousands of years, astrologers have recognized the correlation between eclipses and major events on the world stage. That's why eclipses were one of the first things that astrologers began to track and predict, because we do see that important historical moments often come to a peak during these seasons. And of course, this is why eclipse season can be so intense and difficult to deal with, because on a personal level, we are experiencing those course corrections and we can feel vulnerable and uncertain. And at the same time, in the world, we are witnessing or being caught up in the bigger movement of history and experiencing these larger world events. And because so often we are witnessing these events during a time, eclipse season, when our own vulnerabilities and uncertainties are at play, it can really be difficult psychologically and emotionally to navigate this time. So not every eclipse season, but this one is certainly shaping up to be one of those eclipses that's challenging on the world stage and challenging to us personally. We're also just coming out of this recent Mars-Pluto square. So a square is a dynamic conversation between the planets that requires action. Squares are like dynamos. They move things forward. They're very active transits. And this is a conversation between Mars, our driving force in life. Mars loves to separate things. Mars was known as the god of war. Mars is the inner force that allows us to protect ourselves, but he is also our aggression. He is our need to separate from the things that aren't serving us, but in his shadow aspect, he can be destructive. So Mars has been in this dynamic conversation with Pluto, Pluto being one of the transpersonal planets Pluto was the god who ruled the underworld, was the lord of the dead. We think of him as the lord of transformation, he who brings change through the death and rebirth cycle. When we're having a transpersonal planet affect our chart, those are the times when we feel that we have encountered a force bigger than ourselves. So here we have one of the personal planets where we take action, where we separate ourselves, where we protect ourselves, where we make war, having a really dynamic conversation with one of the transpersonal planets, the Lord of Death and Transformation. These squares often correlate out in the world in what we call mundane astrology, the astrology of the world. They often correlate to the beginnings of wars. That's something that we as astrologers have been watching coming for most of this year. But on a personal level, and this again is the main point of this video, is to really help you to work with the anxiety that naturally comes up around eclipse season, work with the anxiety that might come up because all the astrologers are talking in these big dramatic terms, and help you to understand that there's a difference between mundane astrology, how the planets mirror what's happening on the world stage, and personal natal astrology or transit astrology, which is how those same transits affect you personally. Again, there's an overlap because we get caught up in systems. We get caught up in the tide of world events. But there's enough anxiety. I want to give you a perspective that not every drama that plays out of the sky is going to play out as a drama in your life. It depends on your chart. It depends on what we call your karma or your fate. It depends on how closely linked you are to the systems in the world that bring these big events. And for most of us, honestly, it will be a very, very small drama. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have import. that it isn't important for your psychological growth. Okay. Mars Pluto Square, big, dynamic, potent, and not very pleasant forces at work in the world. What does that look like for you personally? I want you to stay with these ideas of action and separation and transformation and rebirth that we have with Mars and Pluto. Put this in the most evolutionary light and think about the actions that you feel impelled to take to set good boundaries and protect yourself, to assert yourself in the world, to separate yourself from something that's no longer serving you. And if you follow that drive, you will transform. Something in your life that is not serving you will die away and you will experience a transformation. So that's the light that I want you to shine onto your experience of the Pluto-Mars square. This eclipse is on the south node, which means it wants you to release something. So again, taking that idea of separating yourself from aspects of a relationship, a relational pattern, a relationship, yes, maybe, but thinking in less dramatic terms, it may be a dynamic in a particular relationship, just something that isn't allowing you to fully express who you are. You need to separate yourself, not necessarily from that person, but from that dynamic and from that pattern. The south node is like the cosmic compost. You need to offer something up to the cosmic compost, and it's going to reward you with rich soil to grow the next new thing in. It's something important in your life, and it's around your relationships or your sense of balance in the world, your internal sense of balance, justice, and rightness. So what is the relational dynamic that you need to offer up to the cosmic compost? You will feel impelled to do that now. It might be scary. It might cause you to think about death and rebirth and who will I be without this particular relationship dynamic. If you're feeling a little bit of that fear, that's really natural. It's part of the destabilizing influence of eclipses because we're going into something that's unknown. We're working with our own energies in a way that we have never worked with them before. The lights go off and then they come back on again, and we're not the same after that eclipse. So it can feel scary, but there is an evolutionary way to use this. So South Node, we're offering something to the cosmic compost. Libra, it's about relational dynamics. Just coming out of the Mars-Pluto square, it's serious. And it's about what's holding you back from really having strong boundaries and strong self-expression and protecting yourselves. Just in brief, I'll say that I'm seeing the lunar eclipse in 2 weeks coming in like a balm, B-A-L-M, a soothing balm to help us to somatically integrate into our bodies, into our psyches, the changes that we're making on this solar eclipse. So we can look forward to the psychological integration of that North Node Taurus eclipse on the full moon in 2 weeks. I hope some of this will be useful for you as you navigate the challenge of these eclipses. If you want some further support, I'm doing a masterclass this Friday, or you can buy it and watch the recording if you're watching this later. Friday the 13th, the day before the eclipse. It's a 90-minute masterclass. You'll learn more about the eclipses, and we'll really dig deep and break down the transits that are happening with these 2 eclipses. But it's more than that, because it's also a chance to sit and do some journaling to really analyze where these eclipses are landing in your chart and what that means personally for you. We'll have some reflective time in small groups with each other to really get a chance to understand on a personal level what's happening with these eclipses. So some teaching, some work within the group, some community work, and some introspective and journaling work all tied together. As well, I'll be giving you my favorite tips and tricks for surviving, remediating, just generally helping you get through the eclipses. Those are all about the supports. Let's get through this season. Okay. The link to join that masterclass is in the description underneath this video, or it's in the email that you received this video in. And I really hope to see you there. If you're in Canada, just email me and you can pay at par for this workshop. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening.